In 1241, a European kingdom vanished in mere weeks, not due to plague or civil strife, but at the hands of the Mongol Empire, the era's most formidable military force. 1/3 of Hungary's population perished, countless villages turned to ash, and the king was reduced to a fugitive, fleeing from one city to another. A German monk lamented that after 350 years, the kingdom of Hungary had been obliterated. Yet 44 years later, when the Mongols returned with identical strategies, strength, and determination for conquest, they suffered an unequivocal defeat. They failed to capture even a single fortified city, endured thousands of casualties, and retreated in disgrace. What transformative event occurred during those 4 decades? What secret weapon converted a ruined nation into an unassailable bastion? Before I disclose it, please share in the comments where you are viewing this from and what time it is currently. I'm truly interested in our global audience. And here's a question to ponder. Was this secret weapon a miraculous invention, or something far more profound concerning resilience and adaptation? To grasp the nature of this hidden strength, we must first comprehend the preceding disaster. In March 1241, 5 Mongol armies simultaneously launched an invasion of Hungary from 5 distinct directions. This was not an unexpected assault. It was a meticulously orchestrated campaign devised by Subutai, widely considered the greatest military strategist in Mongol history. Subutai had dispatched spies into Poland, Austria, and deep within Hungarian territory. He was intimately familiar with the terrain and the vulnerabilities of his adversaries. Crucially, he recognized Hungary's internal divisions. King Béla IV, an intelligent and brave sovereign, had attempted to centralize royal authority by reclaiming lands previously granted to the nobility by his father. This action bred profound resentment. Some Hungarian nobles secretly hoped for a Mongol victory over the king, erroneously believing the catastrophe would be localized and spare them. They were tragically mistaken. However, an even greater weakness existed than political fragmentation: Hungary's defense infrastructure. In 1241, the entirety of the Kingdom of Hungary, a territory comparable in size to modern-day Poland, possessed fewer than 10 stone castles. Most of these were situated on its western frontier with Austria, far from the eastern regions where the Mongol assault occurred. Why was this the case? It wasn't due to poverty or backwardness, but a deliberate governmental policy. For centuries, Hungarian monarchs had prohibited nobles from constructing private stone castles, fearing that such fortresses would empower lords to defy royal authority, leading to feudalism and civil conflict. While this policy preserved the king's centralized power during peacetime, it proved to be a death warrant during the Mongol War. Most Hungarian towns and villages relied on wooden forts, earthen ramparts, and moats for protection. These defenses might have sufficed against Western armies, but they were no match for the Mongols. The Mongol army deployed siege engines capable of launching stones weighing dozens of pounds, incendiary devices, and brutal tactics. They compelled prisoners to fill moats with earth and bodies, creating pathways for their troops to advance. A German chronicler noted, "The Hungarians had almost no city protected by strong walls or fortresses." Regarding their army, Hungary commanded between 60,000 and 100,000 warriors. While seemingly impressive, the majority were lightly armored cavalry, reminiscent of their Hunnic ancestors. They lacked heavily armored knights and possessed very few crossbowmen. They were also unfamiliar with the warfare tactics of these steppe invaders. The Mongols, with approximately 80,000 troops, consisted of professional warriors, each extensively trained from childhood. They wielded composite bows with a range of 300 meters and employed deceptive retreat maneuvers to ensnare enemies in ambushes and encirclements. And they had Subutai. On April 11, 1241, the two armies clashed at the Sajo River near the village of Mohi. On the evening of April 10th, the Hungarian army encamped along the Sajo's banks, confident in their strategic position. They believed that by controlling the 200-meter-long bridge over the river, they could halt the Mongol advance. At midnight, a Mongol vanguard attempted to cross the bridge. Prince Koloman and Archbishop Ugolin, alongside the Knights Templar, immediately counterattacked and emerged victorious. Hungarian crossbowmen, though few, inflicted heavy casualties on the narrow bridge. Chronicler Thomas of Split recorded, "The Mongol vanguard was killed almost to a man." The Hungarians charged into them and cut down a great many, pushing the rest back across the bridge, causing them to drown in the river. The Hungarian forces returned to their camp, celebrating their perceived victory. They believed the war was over. Unbeknownst to them, Subutai was observing from a distance, and he had just gleaned a vital lesson. Hungarian crossbows were formidable, and the narrow bridge was a Mongol vulnerability. Consequently, Subutai revised his strategy. While Batu Khan kept the Hungarians occupied by assaulting the bridge with 7 stone-throwing devices, Subutai stealthily guided a sizable contingent southward, establishing a makeshift river crossing. Concurrently, Badu's sibling, Shaban, led forces northward, seeking a suitable ford. By dawn on April 11th, the Hungarians abruptly found themselves encircled on 3 sides. Their counterattack attempts were futile. The Mongols employed gunpowder weaponry, a novel technology from China, to sow chaos within the Hungarian encampment. Horses bolted and soldiers trampled one another. A Hungarian nobleman later recounted, "More men perished from being trampled than from arrows." Then, Subutai executed his ultimate strategic maneuver. He intentionally left a gap in their encirclement. Perceived as an opportunity for survival, the Hungarians surged through the opening. However, this was a deliberate snare. Once they exited the camp and dispersed across the open terrain, Mongol mounted archers relentlessly pursued them in small units, like quarry. Yet again, Hungarian crossbowmen displayed immense bravery, with chronicles reporting significant casualties inflicted upon the Mongols. Batu Khan nearly ordered a retreat due to the severe losses, but Subutai persuaded him to persist. Ultimately, 60,000 Hungarians perished. King Béla IV escaped thanks to his desperate bodyguards. Nobles, commoners, and bishops all met the same fate. Over the subsequent year, the Mongols devastated Hungary, incinerating 50 to 80% of villages in the plains, enslaving the populace, and dismantling irrigation systems, which led to famine in 1242 and 1243. Hungary ceased to function as a viable state. Remarkably, in March 1242, the Mongols withdrew. The official justification was the death of Great Khan Ogedei in December 1241, necessitating the prince's return to Mongolia for the selection of a new Khan. However, contemporary historians have identified inconsistencies. News of the death could not have reached Batu Khan in time, and furthermore, Batu declined to return to Mongolia for the election. So, what truly prompted their departure? Some evidence suggests the Mongol forces were more depleted than publicly acknowledged. Despite their victory at Mohi, they encountered tenacious pockets of resistance. Esztergom, Hungary's capital, featured a small stone citadel at its core. Batu Khan bombarded it with siege engines, but its walls held firm. His attempts to storm it were repelled by crossbowmen within the fortress, under the command of an Aragonese knight named Simon. Chronicler Rogerius noted the terrifying effectiveness of these crossbowmen in inflicting casualties on the Mongols. Similarly, the stone fortresses of Székesfehérvár, Pannonhalma, and Csesztve remained impregnable. At Csesztve, defenders even rolled boulders down the hillside onto Mongol troops after their siege engines failed. Recent archaeological discoveries reveal an even more astonishing detail. Hungarian villagers had excavated defensive ditches around stone churches perched on hills and fought from these positions. Hundreds of weapons and skeletal remains bearing battle injuries have been unearthed. Ordinary people resisted everywhere, impeding the Mongol advance. A modern historian observed that the collective resistance of the Hungarians was far more significant than what was recorded in Western and Eastern historical sources. Perhaps Batu Khan's withdrawal was not solely for political reasons, but because he recognized that while Hungary could be ravaged, it could not be fully subjugated at the existing cost. In May 1242, King Béla IV returned to a ravished nation. This proved to be a pivotal historical moment. A weak monarch might have succumbed to despair. An ordinary king might have focused solely on restoring what was lost. But Béla did not. He surveyed the destruction and posed a different question. Why did some areas endure? The answer was evident: stone castles, crossbowmen, and heavy armor. From this realization, he made the most audacious decision of his life, one that defied centuries of Hungarian tradition. In 1247, Béla IV penned a letter to Pope Innocent IV, outlining his plan to fortify the Danube, a river historically prone to confrontations, with stone fortresses. Yet, this was merely the genesis. Béla took an unprecedented step. He relinquished the royal monopoly on castle construction. He permitted nobles, bishops, and even towns to erect their own fortresses, with a single stipulation: they had to be prepared to fight for the king when necessary. This represented an enormous political wager. Recall that the previous policy, prohibiting castle construction, aimed to prevent nobles from accumulating excessive power. Now, Béla was reversing this policy. Why? Because he comprehended a fundamental truth. It is preferable to possess a robust kingdom with influential nobles than to be a feeble king presiding over ruins. He trusted that the threat from the Mongols was so profound it would unite Hungary, and he was correct. The outcomes were astounding. Within the first decade, 44 new stone castles were erected. By the conclusion of Béla's reign, that figure approached 100. Recent scholarly estimates suggest that between 1242 and 1300, a significant number of new defensive structures, specifically 147 to 172, were erected. Hungary underwent a dramatic transformation during this period, evolving from a monarchy possessing merely 10 stone strongholds into a formidable bastion dotted with hundreds of fortified positions. However, King Béla's initiatives extended beyond mere construction of stone walls. He fundamentally overhauled the military system. In 1248, Béla implemented a new decree that allowed the middle class to serve nobles and receive land grants, contingent on their commitment to fight fully armored in the royal army. This represented a groundbreaking shift. Hungary's military strategy now prioritized heavily armored knights, mirroring Western European styles, rather than relying on light cavalry. Earlier, in 1247, he had solidified an alliance with the Knights of St. John, ceding them the southeastern border regions in exchange for their expertise in training armored cavalry and constructing fortifications. A pivotal move occurred in 1259 when Béla petitioned the Pope to facilitate an arrangement with Venice for the recruitment of at least 1,000 skilled crossbowmen. The strategic importance of crossbowmen was immense. Crossbows offered 3 crucial advantages over Mongol weaponry. 1. Extended range. European heavy crossbows, in particular, boasted a greater firing range, capable of reaching 350 to 400 meters, surpassing the Mongol composite bows. 2. Superior armor penetration. A crossbow bolt possessed the power to pierce through Mongol leather and wooden armor, even from considerable distances. Sex. Ease of training. Unlike archers who required years of practice, a common peasant could acquire basic crossbow proficiency within a few weeks, making rapid army expansion feasible. Nevertheless, the most significant utility of crossbows wasn't on open battlefields, but in fortress defense. Béla recognized that Hungary could not contend with the Mongols in mobile warfare on the plains. Yet, from behind robust stone ramparts equipped with specially designed narrow arrow slits, crossbowmen could unleash volleys while remaining completely shielded. This defensive innovation rendered the Mongols, masters of mobile mounted archery, largely ineffectual. Béla also implemented reforms in urban planning. In 1248, he relocated the populace of Pest from the flatlands to an elevated area across the Danube, where they established a new fortified settlement known as Buda. Within 2 decades, Buda emerged as Hungary's principal commercial hub. He extended self-governing charters to over 20 cities, encouraging them to erect stone defenses and manage their own security. Perhaps the most profound change was not military, but psychological. Béla welcomed thousands of immigrants from Germany, Poland, and Italy to settle in Hungary, aiding in the repopulation of the war-torn territories. He offered them conditional nobility, a new social standing, if they pledged to serve as mounted armored fighters when summoned by the king. This constituted a novel social compact. The state provided land, protection, and status, while the populace offered loyalty and military service, all united by a singular objective: to prevent a recurrence of the 1241 catastrophe. Béla consequently earned the moniker Hungary's second founder, not because he originated the nation, but because he rebuilt it from ruin with a revitalized vision. The efficacy of these reforms would be tested in the winter of 1285. Throughout the 1250s and 1260s, the Khans of the Golden Horde relentlessly issued ultimatums to Hungary. In 1254, Batu Khan demanded a marital alliance and a quarter of Hungary's army for a European conquest campaign, which Béla declined. Burkhan reiterated this demand in 1259, requesting surrender, troop contributions, a fifth of any plunder, and tax exemption. Again, Béla refused. Another ultimatum in 1264 was met with similar defiance. In correspondence with the Pope, Béla expressed that the Mongols had proven untrustworthy for decades, rendering any agreement with them valueless. He understood their return was inevitable, the only uncertainty being its timing. In December 1285, the anticipated moment arrived. Nogai Khan and Talabuga, 2 prominent generals of the Golden Horde, spearheaded an invasion of Hungary, following the same invasion routes as in 1241. Talabuga through the Verki Pass from the north, and Nogai through Transylvania from the south. They anticipated an effortless triumph, recalling the vulnerable Hungary of 1241. They believed 44 years was insufficient to alter the fundamental character of a society. Their assumption was profoundly mistaken. Talabuga's forces advanced into northern Hungary, employing their customary tactics of speed, surprise, and enemy division. However, this time they encountered an unprecedented obstacle: stone castles strategically positioned on every significant hill, important river crossing, and trade route junction. Talabuga's assault on Regek Castle in the Zemplén region failed. He attempted a siege, but his troops were subjected to constant bombardment by crossbowmen from the walls. The ingeniously designed narrow arrow slits enabled crossbowmen to fire outward while being nearly impervious to attack. He deployed siege engines, but unlike the wooden and earthen defenses of 1241, these robust stone walls held firm. A chronicler noted that Talabuga faced immense challenges due to the dense network of fortifications and failed to capture any castles or fortified towns. While Talabuga was bogged down in the north, Nogai initially experienced greater success in Transylvania. He sacked the cities of Rian, Brasov, and Bistrica, urban centers that were not yet fully fortified. However, he then encountered the fortified castle network. At the stronghold of Trasco, Sekli defenders successfully repelled numerous consecutive assaults. This signified a considerable divergence from the events of 1241. On this occasion, the Hungarian forces were not merely defending passively, they mounted proactive offensives against local detachments under the leadership of Roland Borsa, Amadeus Abba, George Baca, and Peter of Saros. These officers, all trained and elevated in rank following strategic reforms, continually ambushed and harassed Mongol troops. These were not the lightly armed cavalry observed in 1241. Instead, they were heavily armored knights, equipped similarly to their Western counterparts, engaging in combat from fortified castle positions. Hungary's updated strategy involved utilizing castles as fortified strongholds, employing crossbowmen to inflict casualties from a distance, and deploying heavily armored knights for counterattacks when Mongol forces showed signs of exhaustion. For the Mongols, whose primary advantage lay in mobile warfare across open plains, this presented an insurmountable challenge. They were unable to draw their adversaries into open-field confrontations. They failed to capture fortified castles. With each passing day, they suffered additional losses due to ambushes, illness, and insufficient provisions. Ultimately, King Ladislaus IV assembled the main army on the western bank of the Danube, forming a substantial, well-equipped, and confident force. Upon observing this, Talabuga made the decision to retreat. Nevertheless, retreating through the Carpathian Mountains during winter, amidst a hostile local populace, proved catastrophic. The Sekli forces ambushed Talabuga's retreating troops. Heavy snowfall obstructed their path. The army consequently disintegrated. Nogai to the south also sustained significant casualties. According to historical chronicles, he managed to acquire some spoils but lost thousands of his warriors. After 2 months, the Mongol forces completely withdrew from Hungary. Not a single fortified city had fallen into their hands, nor had they managed to apprehend the king. They returned with minimal spoils and immense losses. A historian noted, the outcome could not have presented a sharper contrast with the 1241 invasion. While Hungary was devastated within weeks in 1241, the Mongols were repelled within months in 1285. What accounted for this difference? We now revisit the initial inquiry. What was Hungary's secret weapon? If one anticipates a miraculous innovation, some novel weapon, or an unparalleled tactic unknown elsewhere, disappointment will follow, as the secret weapon was not singular. It constituted a comprehensive system. The first component comprised stone castles, ranging in age from approximately 10 to nearly 140 years. This included not only grand fortresses, but also modest stone towers on hilltops, town walls, and fortified monasteries. This formed a dense defensive network that rendered free movement by invaders impossible. Each castle served as a declaration. You may destroy villages, but you cannot seize this territory. The second component was crossbowmen. This was not because crossbows inherently outmatched Mongol bows in every scenario, but because within the context of castle defense, crossbows enabled users, including civilians with rudimentary training, to inflict effective damage from behind secure fortifications. In 1241, Hungary possessed only a handful of crossbowmen. By 1285, the majority of border castles were manned by professional crossbowmen. The third component involved heavily armored knights. Their purpose was not to defeat Mongol mounted archers on open plains, which remained a difficult feat. Rather, they served as a counterattack force when Mongols were drawn into close-quarters combat or when they besieged castles and became fatigued. In 1241, only the Knights Templar and a few foreign knights wore full armor. In 1285, Hungary boasted thousands of such knights, trained and funded through the new feudal system established by Béla. The fourth, and perhaps most crucial, component was strategy. Béla recognized that Hungary could not overcome the Mongols in a war of attrition on the plains. Consequently, he did not attempt to. Instead, he devised a multi-layered defense strategy. Layer 1. Castles and fortified cities slow the enemy and inflict casualties. Layer 2. Crossbowmen from the walls weaken the invading forces. Layer 3. Armored knights launch counterattacks from secure bases. Layer 4. Local populations ambush and harass during enemy retreat. This represented an active defense strategy, not merely resisting, but making invasion prohibitively costly to sustain. In 1241, the Mongols inflicted destruction upon Hungary at an acceptable cost. In 1285, the cost became unacceptable. However, there was a final, less tangible, yet perhaps most significant component: collective will. Béla had transformed the catastrophe of 1241 into a national memory, a potent source of motivation. Every Hungarian understood that the Mongols would return. Every castle constructed, every knight trained, every crossbowman recruited, all served a singular objective: to never repeat the events of 1241. This explains why the nobles, disunited in 1241, became unified in 1285. This is why ordinary people who fled in 1241 fought from castles in 1285. The Mongols were not vanquished by a single weapon. They were defeated by the societal transformation. The narrative of Hungary is not merely ancient history. It offers profound insights for anyone, individuals or organizations, confronting failure and needing to recover. The first lesson is that failure can serve as valuable information. Many individuals, after experiencing failure, tend to assign blame, offer excuses, or deny reality. Béla IV adopted a different approach. He meticulously analyzed failures. What enabled certain regions to endure? Why did crossbow units outperform light cavalry? How did the Mongols fail to capture Esztergom? He distilled insights from catastrophe, converting them into a strategic framework. In life, whether facing professional, business, or personal setbacks, the pertinent question isn't about misfortune, but rather, what insights can this failure provide? The second key takeaway is that systemic transformation demands political fortitude. Béla's most audacious move wasn't constructing fortifications, but rather relinquishing his absolute power monopoly to share it with nobles. This act defied conventional kingly instincts, introducing considerable risk. Yet, Béla recognized that in the new era, defined by the Mongol threat, clinging to the old system of centralized castle control would lead to annihilation. It was preferable to distribute authority within a robust nation than to wield solitary power over ruins. Many contemporary leaders falter by attempting to preserve antiquated paradigms in a modern world, fearing change more than failure itself. Thirdly, defense doesn't equate to passivity. Hungary in 1285 didn't merely barricade itself and wait. They established defensive networks, complementing them with aggressive counteroffensives. In personal life, active defense entails safeguarding one's health, relationships, and finances, while simultaneously seeking opportunities for a strategic counterattack at the opportune moment. The fourth lesson is that time becomes an asset when utilized effectively. The 44 years spanning 1241 to 1285 may not be extensive in historical terms, but Béla methodically leveraged each one. Initial years were dedicated to building essential castles. The subsequent year saw military reforms. Following years focused on recruiting crossbowmen and continuously training knights without respite. Many individuals abandon ambitious goals, deeming decades too long. Yet these decades will unfold regardless. The crucial question is, how many strongholds will you have erected by then? Fifth, preparing for the worst cultivates mental fortitude. Béla harbored no illusions about the Mongols' potential return. He anticipated it. He communicated to his populace that all preparations were based on a worst-case scenario. When the Mongols eventually reappeared, panic was absent. They were prepared. In life, naive optimism is hazardous. Realistic optimism, which involves hoping for the best while simultaneously bracing for the worst, builds resilience. Finally, the most enduring legacy is a robust system, not individual accomplishments. Béla IV passed away in 1270, 15 years prior to the second invasion. He never witnessed his unique defense system put to the ultimate test. Nevertheless, the framework he established continued to operate. The castles remained intact. Knights were trained according to his methodologies. The defensive strategy was inherited. He had forged a system that transcended his own lifetime, outliving him. This marks true leadership, not solely what is achieved during one's tenure, but what endures and functions after one's departure. Thus, we journeyed from the devastation of 1241 to the triumph of 1285. The initial query was whether Hungary's decisive advantage was a miraculous innovation or something more profound. The answer is now evident. It was the systematic transformation of its society, in infrastructure, military, politics, and, most critically, in its collective mindset. Stone fortresses, crossbow units, armored knights were merely the tangible manifestations of a fundamental resolve. Hungary would never again be an easy target. In 1241, defeat stemmed from insufficient preparation, internal discord, and an adherence to an obsolete system. By 1285, victory was secured because they had learned, unified, and adapted. The Mongol Empire, the dominant force of its era, wasn't halted by a miracle. They were thwarted by the unwavering perseverance of a people who converted suffering into insights, insights into actions, and actions into a coherent system. Following the 1285 defeat, the Golden Horde never again attacked Hungary. This wasn't due to their weakening, but because the potential cost of invasion had become prohibitively high. Hungary had evolved from a vulnerable target into one not worth the price. And that, perhaps, is the ultimate lesson for every individual and organization. Invincibility isn't necessary. You merely need to make the act of conquering you too costly. Construct your defenses, train your forces, establish your frameworks, and when adversity inevitably strikes, you won't just endure, you will prevail. If this narrative offered you a fresh perspective on fortitude, please show your support. I produce historical videos not solely to recount past events, but to illuminate contemporary understanding. And share your thoughts below. What defenses are you currently building in your life? What system do you need to establish to prepare for future obstacles? In the upcoming video, I will introduce another leader who similarly transformed defeat into triumph, albeit through an entirely different approach. Don't miss it. Thank you for staying with me to the end.